welcome to the Torvus podcast. My name is Ari, and this is episode 8. And we are covering a really timely movie from 1988, John Carpenter's They Live. So I'm joined by Alex and Jason. Let's get into it. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Torvus podcast, everyone. Hey, Jason. Hey, Alex. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Good to be here.
So we just got finished watching They Live, which was John Carpenter's 1988 film, basically about subliminal messaging. It has a lot of subtext to it. It is a fantastic film. We laughed our asses off. And, God, there's a lot to talk about in this one.
So much.
Yeah. So we had mentioned in previous episodes, we're talking about 1988 being an amazing year for film, for action film. We did Bloodsport. That came out.
Bloodsport first, then we did
Above the Law. Die Hard also came out.
And now we've got They Live.
Yeah. So if you have not seen They Live, it is a cult classic. It is a must-see, and it stars Roddy Piper of wrestling fame, and Keith David as his co-host or co-star. And so I don't know, where do we even begin?
I don't know. It was made in 1988, but even in 2018, it would have been super timely.
It's almost, the message is almost stronger now. They probably could have done more with a remake with cell phones and everything now. And
it sees the future. Back in 1988, it saw where we were headed.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen the film, basically we're going to kind of give you an overview of what it is. It's basically Roddy Piper, who is not named in the film, is a trivia thing. He's only named in the credits, and they credit him as Nada. That's his name in the end, but they don't mention his name throughout the whole film.
Which I think is really important. They mention that in credits, but I'll get to that later.
Oh, okay. So the basically film is Roddy Piper is a drifter, comes into Los Angeles, is living kind of in the shanty town thing. He becomes a laborer during the day, finds these sunglasses, puts these sunglasses on, and then when he puts them on, he notices that everything in the world is totally different from what he perceives it to be. So, for example, when he looks at money, it says, "This is your God," and all the signs say "sleep" and
the
obey.
most famous of all, is obey.
Obey.
Even if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen obey, and this is where it comes from.
And consume. And another one I think that's really important is marriage and reproduce.
Yeah.
Because that kind of ties into a lot of people's reason to live and that thing that they reach for too.
Yeah.
So
don't question authority. That was the other one. So fantastic. And really it's even more poignant today than it was back 30 years ago. And Alex actually pointed out that it had kind of themes of The Matrix.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, that same level of there's like this system in control, and there's another entities, in this case aliens as opposed to machines,
right?
But still controlling the masses in this sort of virtual sleep state. Very, very similar to me. I drew that parallel.
Yeah, I think one of the keys in the movie was when they were in the church and they had the writing literally on the wall that said, "They live, we sleep."
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that was really big in there. And then after they do the big raid, that part is painted over.
So one of the things that really kind of touched, home with me was, free thinking is really important. And I refer to myself as a free thinker. A lot of people are consumers and they have to go with the flow and they don't want to rock the boat. But free thinking is super important. And that's why I love this film, because you've got to be a free thinker. You got to think for yourself. If you look at the internet today, this is what blows my mind. Facebook. Someone will see a quote unquote news piece on Facebook, then share it without doing any research whatsoever, and they believe it to be verbatim true, and it actually is not true because they haven't sourced it. And then it gets spread, and it gets spread.
Yeah, the whole fake news epidemic that we're going through now, right?
Massive. Yeah. And the governments and that type of thing, they're just controlling it. They realize that people do it, so they love it.
Yeah, and they control the media. This gets right back into it. It's no coincidence they use this whole channel 54. So this is cable TV was like hot new thing in the 80s. There's no internet and all this other stuff, but
Right.
but cable TV and the control of the media in order to control the masses through the rich and powerful, using the media to control the masses, again, even more timely today than it was back then. Technology's changed a little bit, but damn, this thing held up way better than I thought it would.
Yeah, it was good.
And another kind of parallel too to the Matrix and some other of these films is the way that they would goad regular people into it. So there's always like that, oh, they don't exist, look at this guy. Like, they always have someone who's in on it, who's on the ground floor, your boss, whatever it is, coworker, oh, you got the promotion. Like you
need
it's like
your
winning the lottery, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it exists. You can have that happy life. The American dream is real, right? Then here's an example of it. This person who's totally in on it. And
right, you need your collaborators if you're going to have an
Exactly.
alien invasion.
And it was really neat. There's one scene in there where it's basically they're in a convenience store and it has an alien and a human talking, and the human's like, hey man, I didn't get the promotion,
Yeah.
congrats on you. And the alien's like, hey man, don't worry, you just keep working at it, you'll get it there. And so all the aliens obviously are in places of power.
Fucking rigged system, man.
You work hard, you'll get it, even though he didn't, he's just
never
sitting
will.
back and he's getting the promotions,
Yeah.
right? It's that kind of, that system.
The
there.
illusion of the American dream.
So one of the really cool things of the Torvus podcast that it's been morphing into it, because it's kind of an organic thing that's happening. So with Jason, myself, and Alex has never seen this film. He hadn't heard about this film.
Wasn't born yet.
He wasn't born yet. And so that's the other thing. Alex, there's a 20-year difference between us, and he's very mature, though. And we're really immature, so we kind of meet somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So the great thing is his perspective from someone who's a generation behind us. Fantastic. So I want you to kind of, give me a 1-minute impression of watching the film, what you thought.
I thought it was fantastic, and again, I look at the context here, not so much, if you look at the superficial, if you say, how was the acting, how, the regular way that you judge a film, yeah, it's a B movie, it falls short in a lot of the different scenes and the continuity, and, he just sprays his guns for, 10 minutes straight, flailing all over the place, right, like, so some of those scenes, but there's a lot of great fight scenes. You had told me that I guess the Guinness Book of World Records was in there for the longest fight scene that just
which we're
going to
talk about in a minute.
That was hilarious, so well done. I really enjoyed that. But I think to me that a lot of the times too, when you have an art form and sometimes when you dress it up in a B movie or something like that, it doesn't exclude the ability to have a deeper meaning or to have kind of a more in-depth philosophical meaning behind the film. Right. And that to me is what really hit home and seemed to actually have quite a bit of like homework done on it and have a larger message, which really kind of resounded with me, right? One of my favorite movies of all time is The Matrix, and again, I draw an instant parallel to this, and the same kind of message. And
so The Matrix is almost like They Live of your
It's
generation.
your
it's the 90s,
generation,
yeah, exactly, right? Like
because that's your internet doing
and
it
it's like
instead of
take the blue pill and it's just put on the sunglasses, and then boom, your whole world changes, right?
absolutely, yeah. Instead of magazines and newspapers and TV,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the interesting thing
not
about They Live, it's based on a 1963 short story that was called 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
So that's where it comes from. And then some years later, I think in the late 60s, it became a comic book of basically aliens who have come into our culture and no one realizes that they're there. And then they made the movie, obviously John Carpenter did. God, there was a lot of things we saw in this film that was absolutely crazy. So one of the things about John Carpenter, I'm an absolute fan of his. He directed one of my favorite movies of all time, probably my favorite movie of all time, which we will cover in a future
Inevitably.
which is Big Trouble in Little China. But he kind of reused, some actors and things like that. He used Keith David, who's the co-star in this, and Keith David was in 1982's The Thing by John Carpenter.
One of the best horror movies ever. We have to cover that one.
Yeah, that's also super. So he used him, but there was a scene that jumped out at us that we just did not expect. So Alex, Jason, and I, at the same time, we had no idea that this was in it because we
Totally
haven't seen it
forgot
for years.
this. Unbelievable.
There's a scene where they're shooting in an alleyway, and all of a sudden, this Asian guy comes out with a machine gun and is shooting at the cops. That Asian guy is the henchman in Hollywood, and his name is Al Leong.
Or as I call him, the diehard candy bar guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he has all of these amazing roles. So the diehard candy guy. He is in Big Trouble, Little China. He is in so many different films.
He's kind of that stuntman that really broke the mold and was able to have a character set aside from just doing stunts. He's like the bad guy that you're like, that guy's awesome. Like that guy, you know, he left an impression on you. He adds to the film beyond just doing cool shit, you know?
Which is so cool. So if you don't know who Al Leong is, you'll recognize him instantaneously. He has long shoulder length hair, kind of balding on top, and he's kind of got this Fu Manchu goatee thing, and he's an amazing martial artist as well. So good. And who was telling me about the trivia of the chocolate bar?
That was me, yeah. So I guess when he did Die Hard, that scene where he's, you know, hiding behind the desk, it's a big tense moment before the police are about to raid and break in. There's candy bars behind the counter, and he takes one, opens it up, and starts eating a candy bar. He came up with that because he said the scene was too tense and needed some comic relief, you know, just tossed in there to kind of keep things light. So it's always great when you can get a professional who kind of sees beyond what their role is and adds to it, you know, breaks the mold a bit. So
he's like the ultimate
stunt
so
man,
good. Okay, so we're going to talk about, let's just get right into it. We're going to talk about halfway through the film, the fight scene. Now, this fight scene is actually had been in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest continuous fight scene in a movie. I think it might have been beaten, but the big fight sequence that was designed, it was actually rehearsed and choreographed in the backyard of John Carpenter by Roddy Piper and Keith David. And the actual fight initially was only supposed to last 20 seconds. However, Piper and David decided that they wanted to fight it out for real. And they had talked to each other, and the only thing that they agreed on is that there were no hits to the face and or the groin. Everything else was they could hit each other in the body, they could throw each other, that type of thing. So they rehearsed this fight for 3 weeks.
Wow.
And Carpenter was so impressed by it that he kept the scene intact, and it runs a total of 5 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's like one of those, almost like a Family Guy episode where you think the scene's over, but it just keeps going. You know, just like it's just like, no, they're not done yet.
Such an epic fight.
Also, lots of groin shots.
They pulled every groin shot, like, biting, pulling. I mean,
it's funny that you say that though, because the characters almost allude to like they're going to keep it an honorable fight, and it kind of starts off very above the board, you know, like kind of boxing, let the guy get back up
until the board comes out when he gets the hacksaw 2x4 whatever thing out there,
and then it just starts to all go to hell after that.
There's a scene in there where Roddy Piper takes the 2x4 and he swings it and he hits the back of the car. And then you see Keith David's face go, "You serious?"
Yeah.
And he's holding that bottle there.
He picks up a bottle, and then I love it when he goes to break the bottle and the whole thing just smashes. It's like shit, you know, like it was just great that, you know, sometimes even in a fight scene, you know, it doesn't always go that way. So it kind of poked fun at fight scenes almost.
And it was a really cool fight because what are they fighting for? The fight is all about Piper's trying to put the glasses on them. And it's like, you will look in these glasses or I will beat you until you look in these glasses. Like, no, I'm not going to look in these glasses. That's what the fight was.
Yeah, it was a mental principle.
Will you put the sunglasses on? So
and it almost gets really, if you really, I don't know, for me, I can get really meta and kind of in my head about it, but it almost is that this is the moment where the supporting character is going to have that veil lifted. So instead of, you know, that Neo scene where it's take the pill and the whole movie alludes to it, this is, you're the second guy. This guy who is just been brought into it. It's not Morpheus. It's not some big new guy. It's some guy who just is literally seeing beyond the veil here, and it seems like a lunatic is trying to cram some nonsense down your throat.
Right, which is a microcosm for the whole movie.
Exactly.
This one fight is you're fighting to show the human race what's being done to them, so you're fighting to reveal the truth.
And he's fighting about something, and the guy resisting it doesn't even know. He's just dismissing him as being insane instead of just putting on the glasses and solving the whole problem, right? So it really was...
Stay blind,
And we had joked about this. So in my occupation, when I actually run into people who are talking crazy and stuff like that, we discount them immediately.
Your occupation for people starting with this episode.
But the funny thing is like Roddy Piper's like, you know, they're controlling us and you know, everything's subliminal messages, and we're like, oh, these people are crazy, but like, who's actually the crazy people in the real world, right? Like,
I'm sure as a police officer you see a lot of like different levels of conspiracy theories and the fuck the man and the system.
But it makes you wonder. It's like,
what are they seeing it from their point of view?
Right? Well, and that's the thing in the film. You see a lot of. I mean, obviously the police are not portrayed very positively in this whatsoever, but there's it's a mix. It's not all aliens.
But
it's
they're
a
also
mix
they're
of-
also careful to distinguish between what the human police are doing versus the alien police. 'Cause
Right.
he does have that thing there where he kills a whole bunch of alien police, and then he gets the one cop,
And he
that's,
lets him go.
and he
And
lets him
another
go,
interesting thing I
'cause
wanted
he's
to kind of
human.
talk about though is the fact that he's just blindly murdering all these aliens. You know, like
Yeah.
they're oppressing it, but like he at the same time, you know, kind of goes deep into human nature if you really look at it and say,
Yeah.
well, these guys have been oppressing us, so we're just gonna fucking wipe them out. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't really
Yeah.
solve the problem. You know what I mean? But it's just there's so many great things to really to see in the whole.
Yeah, but that's part of the
depth
whole
movie.
thing is you can flip it the other way and say like who's the bad guys here, who's the good guys, bad guys.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is about that class struggle. So like I said, it was about they live, we sleep, and I say if you flip that into we wake, then they die. So
Yeah.
that's like the call for the rise to revolution, and that's the whole thing is like as soon as people reveal, then they're like, oh my god, we have to do something up. So when you wake up, putting those glasses on is the awakening, the revelation, the enlightenment.
And one of the things about this fight scene, this 5-minute and 20-minute fight scene in the alley, which was great, was Roddy Piper got to showcase some of his wrestling skills.
Yeah, totally.
So
Suplex
He does
and-
suplex and things like that. And
Yeah,
that was cool.
It was really well done. Yeah, there was a couple of big like throws and toss downs that I was like, wow, this is.
Have you heard of him before
No,
this?
no,
Because
I
he's
had
like
no
old
idea.
school wrestler.
I literally, I was saying, I was like, this looks like Marty McFly's like jacked older brother. Like, I was like, who is this guy? Like, yeah,
It's
I've
so
never
good.
seen anything.
And you
like
know, it's the typical 1980s thing where he's got the plaid on and he's got the
Mullet.
shirt which is tucked into his tight jeans and the mullet and
Like, lots of tight
I love
blue
his
jeans.
first day on the construction site. His shirt's just off, and he's like digging a ditch. I was like, oh yeah, those back in those days. Like I work as an electrician on job sites like that. Like
Yeah.
that's not work safe. You can't do that.
you're not allowed.
But they had a lot about it being the working man. That
Yes.
was part of the whole thing, right? You even had the blind preacher that was in there that was about the thing, and he was feeling his face, and he felt his hands. He's like, these are a working man's hands.
Yeah.
So you knew that he was on the good guy side because he's part of the working man. He wasn't one of the elites.
Yeah, it's the class struggle, right?
Yeah.
So-
It's a pretty thinly veiled message, so I'm not reading too much into this.
The movie itself has one of also the most iconic lines in movies
Oh.
ever. And so, Alex, I had told you that it was coming up in the film. Had you ever heard of it before?
I didn't.
Okay.
No, I hadn't.
So the film, the line we're talking about is, "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." It's when he walks into the bank and he blows away all the...
But, yeah, and there's like a big dramatic pause there too. He's in the bank. And
It was a
everybody's
dramatic
looking at
cause
him
because he just killed the cops.
Yeah.
And then out of he had the cop's gun. Then he went into the car, took the shotgun from the front seat where
Right.
they used to be.
Yeah.
And
He's got a pistol in his
and
pants.
he's got his pistol in
and
his
a
pants,
shotgun.
and he's like, "I got to get off the street. These cops are looking for me." So he ducks into the first door he sees. He walks in, and he turns around, and it's like, "Shit, I'm in a bank." Everyone's looking at him, so he had to come up with something. It was fucking brilliant.
So the kind of the background story to that line is, since Piper was a wrestler, he had a notebook in wrestling, and he would write down one-liners, right?
Oh, from when he would go and
To be
be
a
his
heel.
character. Yeah,
Yeah, they had to do all those interviews.
So when
yeah.
he would just
bone
write them down.
saw, that kind of thing. Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah.
And so he apparently had written this down, and it was ad-libbed in the film
Really?
by Roddy Piper. And John Carpenter liked it so much he actually kept it in. So apparently this line was written in Roddy Piper's notebook. And he shared the notebook with Carpenter, and they agreed that this particular line, it fit the character so well and fit him perfectly that they were just going to keep it in. And he actually went on to use it in his wrestling matches after he filmed this.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great line. Fantastic. And there's like t-shirts about that and memes about
I'm
that.
going to start
now.
using it now. That's
Oh, it's-
fantastic.
Yeah.
it's so good.
Hopefully you can use it better than you can use bubblegum.
So what I'm also going to point out is Jason, when he was watching it, he looked at Roddy Piper, and I saw him kind of looking at the TV screen. And I'm like, what is he looking at? Because I could see Jason looking at different things on the screen. And then Jason turns to me and goes, "Hey, I never noticed that before. Roddy Piper has a wedding
It's a
ring
wedding
on."
ring. Yeah, there's a lot more going on with that character than I remembered.
So here's the thing about the wedding ring. Roddy Piper was married at the time of filming, and he refused to take off his wedding band. And that's why in several scenes you can see the wedding ring on. He didn't want to take it off.
Yeah, but they didn't make anything. Like usually,
They didn't talk about it.
there was no mention of
Yeah,
his
all
wife
his
being
family,
lost.
yeah.
Like clearly, he had some kind of bad backstory going on that he got there, but they didn't get into it.
Well,
I think that's great.
And this is one of the brilliant things I think in a lot of, I mean, you see it now more in certain films. I think one of the kind of the newest reference I can point out would be kind of the Black Mirror episodes where they don't explain everything. They just throw you into this shitty, fucked up scenario to get your mind going, and they don't come up with a resolution even. They'll just say, here it is. Here. And they'll put that thought in the back of your brain and then say, sit on this
right,
one,
and then it sits with you your whole life
Yeah.
and changes your life. So that's interesting. You mentioned Black Mirror, because I was going to mention this. For me, it was like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits from back then. I watch Black Mirror now too because it's awesome.
Yeah.
But this is very much like a deluxe episode of Twilight Zone or Outer Limits, and or to modern people, Black Mirror.
Yeah,
it's,
totally. Yeah,
it's totally like that. It's just like a little bit longer episode of that, and these things are so good.
And Jason, you had actually mentioned previously you want to talk about Roddy Piper's name or not name in the film.
Yes. Okay. So they don't name him in the film at all, or at least that I can remember.
No, they don't.
Okay. So you're the memory guy. So, but at the end credits it said nada, which is like
Spanish for none,
nothing, stuff like that. So there's more other things going back. Famously begin from classics, Odysseus against the Cyclops. He calls himself Nemo, no one, right?
Oh.
So that's part of where that goes, and then you've got Captain Nemo as part of that, and so it's a long thing. So it's not just a randomly chosen name. There's also like Clint Eastwood, the man with no name. So there's this sort of anonymous kind of figure here that is nobody, no one.
But he's somebody.
But he's nobody.
Everyone.
He's nobody. Yes, that's my point.
Yeah.
He's nobody who's fighting for everyone. He's no man who's fighting. He's the hero of every man.
Yeah.
So,
One of the things about Nada, the name Nada, when Ray Faraday wrote the short story, which was 8 o'clock in the morning. The character in that, his actual name was George Nada. Oh. And so
I think the comic was called Nada.
Yeah, it was. And so that's the thing. So I think that's just a reference to it. But it's actually pretty cool.
But do you think it ties in because it's almost like, too, if you're part of that system, you are nobody.
The system.
He started off
that's
asleep,
what I'm saying.
Like,
the system makes you nobody.
Like Mr. Anderson. It's that whole, like, this is your Matrix name. This is, you are this identity. And
it
dehumanizes
you, so the inhuman system dehumanizes you and makes you nobody. So you have to break the system in order to become somebody.
And the really cool thing is, like, right now when we're doing the podcast on the big screen TV behind us, we have a picture of one of the aliens, and the makeup was fantastic. So basically, if you haven't seen it, they look like skulls, humans with skull faces and hands and hair, and pretty creepy. And the eyes are kind of like silvery orbs
with no eyelids.
Yeah,
and the nose is like a skull hole. And the teeth are all bulging out.
Zombies, and it's also a lot of the time they show them. It's not till the end where they get to show them in color. They're in black and white before, so it really goes back to like those 50s, 60s monster movie alien kind of thing. It really has that vibe in there with that. Also, we've got this up on the screen. It's extra funny because it's on the screen looking at a picture from the internet, and what's at the bottom of it? Capitalist propaganda. Bloody ad banners are right below the thing.
Yeah, totally.
So these subliminal ad banners, wow, they were looking forward.
And one of the great things is, so John Carpenter, who directed this, he was a huge fan of Keith David, who was the sidekick of Roddy Piper. And as I had said previously, Keith David was in The Thing in 1982. And Carpenter wanted someone who wouldn't be a traditional sidekick, right? Because they always have the traditional sidekicks, right, in film. Yeah. And so what he did is, he's like, I wanna co-star or sidekick that could hold his own. So he, in the end, Carpenter went to Keith David and he said, "Do you want to be in the film? And I want to bring you in." And that's how that came about. So
it's like a cop buddy movie, except they're against the cops.
Yeah. So Carpenter actually wrote the role of Frank specifically for Keith David.
Oh, nice.
He had him in mind.
Interesting.
He fit it. It was well done. I don't recognize people, but he really did.
And that's the awesome thing, because there's a lot of filmmakers that do that. I love directors that use, like Quentin Tarantino as a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
But if you look at Carpenter, like using Al Leong, who was in Big Trouble in Little China, he used him in this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
it's like a relationship, and they have that, like, this character fits into this story. So or I know this actor, he plays this type of character, where they want to, or it's almost like instead of just someone coming up with a story and creating all the characters, they take characters based off of what other people, the art that other people put out there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? As an actor, you portray yourself, you portray these different characters, and that's almost like where the typecasting can kind of,
Yeah.
you know, put you into that zone, but you're still producing this art, and if a director, if you can recognize that and then take that and without putting your bullshit filter on it,
Yeah.
everything becomes more unique. It's more like a mosaic as opposed to like whitewash, this is what I want, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the cool things, if you look at the movie poster from 1988, they have how they kind of mottos or quotes or whatever on the poster. So one of them was, "You see them on the street, you watch them on TV, you might even vote for them this fall. You think they're just people like you. You're wrong, dead wrong."
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of wondered, because again, this was obviously, like, I saw the rating too. It's rated R. Like nowadays, this would be rated like PG-12.
Yeah,
you know,
if
it would be
that.
like, it wouldn't even
But
be like your children could almost watch it. Like
1988 is a different world. And this is like in the Reagan heyday, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of the point of the whole movie is what Reaganomics and stuff.
Like for
are
me, we
doing.
could watch and kind of laugh about it, but I guess, was this, when you first saw it, when it first came out, was it intended to kind of be like that horror, like, you know, film? Was it supposed to be like kind of scary and edgy, or?
No, I mean, I think we knew at the time. Like, I remember watching this probably in '88. I was a teenager at the time, but even at that point, you knew it was just kind of a commentary on consumerism and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
So
right. And
it wasn't supposed to be scary or anything.
but I mean, it's kind of a weird twist at the end. You know what I mean? Like almost if you watch a
we'll get
Black
to that.
Mirror
Yeah.
episode, it kind of like fucks you up a little
Yeah,
bit.
totally.
Like, whoa. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the ending,
It's ahead of his time for that.
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
ending of this film is fantastic because, you know, riding into the sunset, we solve the problem, but everyone leaves. You know, it's
Yeah,
like,
you've heard the like hero with 1,000 faces. Like no matter how you
Yeah.
dress it up, there's like a cycle. This is the same bullshit
the heroic
story
journey
dressed up.
and all
yeah,
that, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it was good. So one of the Alien TV broadcasts refers to a director. So remember they had TV, and then I said, "Hey guys, I think they just named
Yeah.
John Carpenter."
Yeah.
And they actually did. So in the dialogue, it says filmmakers like George A. Romero and John Carpenter have to show some restraint. They simply, and this is what the lines are in it. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
So there's these little nods in the
Right,
film.
and there's all that, again, back again in the 80s, remember, there's all the, music and TV and then video, like, these are the things that are making people violent, right? That these are what's doing it. And so it's the alien guy talking on a talk show on TV saying about how these things are bad and shouldn't be going for society. So the actual corrupting influences are calling out. Yeah, that's very 80s, having people say that stuff, yeah.
It was very cool. And you know, the aliens in the film, apparently one of the trivia pieces of this is both male and female aliens in the film were portrayed by the stunt coordinator Jeff Imada. And he's credited for the female ghoul played in there, and the multiple male ghouls as well. So Imada played the ghouls in lots of. So that's him right
So
there.
how many of them did he do?
A ton of them.
Yeah.
wow.
They just changed the wigs and stuff.
Oh, I guess you've done the makeup for one guy, so why not do okay? Because
Interesting.
it's a low budget movie, so yeah, that makes sense totally.
Yeah, and so talking about low budget, so there's not a lot of money in this. So in the beginning of the film, Piper puts on the glasses and he looks down the street, and it's a matte painting. And a matte painting basically is what they use in film of, like, you know, distance and the buildings, and it just says billboards.
It looks like a cityscape, but it's just a flat picture.
And all it says is obey, sleep, you know, consume, and all that stuff. However, the scene that he walks into the store, and I was talking to you guys about this, he walks in there and there's aliens and humans mingling in this kind of like mini mart.
Convenience store, yeah.
And when he has the glasses on, he looks, and all of the cans and bottles and food is all wrapped.
Every single item.
Every item in there, it says obey or consume or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was the most expensive scene in the film because the prop director, they had to wrap everything.
Yeah, no
pretty impressive.
CGI back then.
Yeah.
So when we're watching the film and we're looking, and it's like, oh my goodness, like
even the banners on the walls, like that whole store, when you look at it,
The
it's
calendars.
all completely done up. Yeah.
pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You know, imagine having that job. It's like, you got to make sure that this is all covered up.
Well,
you know?
and especially the attention to detail. Like, you know, we're pretty picky guys, and we kind of notice a bunch of shit throughout the film. We can talk on that too. But I mean, that attention to detail in that scene is like, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, to put all that.
That you don't get that nowadays, right? It's just kind of whitewashed over. You get Game of Thrones episodes with Starbucks cups and
I
whatever
love it.
happens.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's just
this is it's ad placement, it's subliminal ad placement instead of just regular
this
ad
one's
placement.
just about literally they will take the time to hand wrap hundreds of cans
So
of
good.
different items to make the message clear, right? Like it's
So
great.
much stuff.
And one of the things about the aliens in the film is, we were talking about they superficially kind of resemble like walking like zombies or corpses. And John Carpenter didn't want them actually to look high tech, like Alien or Aliens.
Right.
He specifically wanted them to kind of look like that, beings that were corrupted. Because it's kind of a subtext on corrupting humanity, right? That's what they say.
What greed does to you. This is what it looks like. This is its
Exactly.
embodiment of, and I can't remember. There were so many good lines. Formaldehyde face.
Oh,
and
do you look like your face is in cheese dip from
That was
1957 or something like that?
He keeps throwing out how when he first starts seeing them, he's just looking at these people on the street.
Yeah,
just
that one lady
saying
in the store there,
weirdest
yeah.
shit to them. It's really funny.
Yeah.
And another thing too to touch on that is these aliens. They used their fancy like Rolex wristwatches to communicate as part of their like elite status, and they can communicate and talk to each other. So it's just it kind of goes back to that haves versus the have-nots, and how to how they all link up and talk to each other, and they're always connected to be against, you can phone, this person's crazy, get him out of here, and everybody swarms in and deals with that crazy person, and they're gone, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've dealt with that problem. They're out of my life. They don't fit into my conformity. They don't fit into what everybody else says is the right way to do things, or the right way to be,
Internet. But let's segue into Dane's Dungeon at the moment.
Okay.
And so Dane's Dungeon, again, part of the podcast where we talk about the cool shit and bullshit things of the film, things we thought were cool and things we thought were total bull. And there's a ton in here. So the first one I'm going to throw out to you guys for being cool shit or bullshit in Dane's Dungeon is near the end of the film, you see some of the security guards and they're using a communication device. And we all looked at the communication device and go,
I think it was a scanner.
it was a scanner
It's
thing.
something,
sorry.
yeah.
And we're like, I think we've seen that before.
that, yeah.
And actually what it was is it was the prop used in Ghostbusters in 1984, which was the PKE meter.
Yes.
Cool shit or bullshit.
So cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because there's actually tons of films in Hollywood where they reuse props from other films, and you pick it out. A classic, an absolute classic in Star Wars. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Because you're a Star Wars guy, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember who IG-88 was?
Yes.
Yeah. The robot in the sand dune thing.
Yeah, IG-88 was a bounty hunter.
Oh, the robot, with the turning head, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't
So
need their skull.
if you actually look in Star Wars, the head at one point they're scanning through, and it's used as like a pipe in a house. And IG-88's head is there.
No,
Wow.
and
I
they
have not
turn that
noticed that.
into him.
Cool.
Yeah.
Because he shows up a bunch in all the extra stories and stuff. And they kind of make the assassin bots in one of the cartoons modeled exactly the same after him. He's been reprogrammed. He's a total badass. But he's one of the. That's really cool. I didn't know
So
that.
it's amazing. Like they did that within the film, but there's other films that have used other props, and those are the kind of little trivia, super geek things.
Yeah, because what do you do
that
with
I
it
love.
when it's all you don't just throw it out. It sits in a Hollywood studio somewhere, and you're like, oh, use this, right?
But when they used it immediately, like we're like, wait a minute,
I was like, what is that?
I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it looked familiar.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about Cool or Bull, the gun work in They Live. What do you think, guys?
I'm not a gun guy, but the way about spraying guns around like that doesn't seem like me the best way to shoot the guns. And the fingers on triggers.
It was total bullshit. It was
Bullshit is what I meant with that.
There was no choreography. There was no thought into it. It was very, Bruce Willis running down the hallway, just spraying the gun. Like there's no continuity. It doesn't make any sense. And one scene, the only thing I'll give them is they do pick up a couple of the bad guys' guns that they've just killed, and that kind of is like a refresh and ammo refresh thing.
Yeah.
But in the movie, they probably shot, I'd say like 700 bullets each. They didn't never reload it. All they did was pick up someone.
They
else's
eventually
guns,
dropped some of the guns, but not in
and there's so as far as that goes, and obviously I think that's a sign of the
wasn't so
times.
good.
Enough people have complained about that kind of stuff in movies now that everybody's on top of it.
No, not always. It depends on the film. So,
Right.
like, I worked in film for a few years, and one of the things, the guy who's a girl who's in charge of the weapons is called the armorer.
Okay.
And the armorer is basically the person, they hold the weapons, they load the weapons, they make sure everything's good, they teach the people how to use them, and it's like, this is what you should do, shouldn't do. Obviously, for this film, it was like there's no armor. It was just kind of like, okay, we're gonna have the guns. So one of the things is they're running around. Keith David at one point is standing there. He's got a hand on his Uzi, and they're in a meeting, and he's got his finger on the trigger. His finger is on the trigger.
They both do, yeah.
Right? And this is a big no-no. So especially as someone who deals with firearms and, which I do, when you have your finger on the trigger, it's like, well, if you have your finger on the trigger, then you should probably you're going to have the conscious decision to shoot. No, you're just hanging out there. And some of these triggers are like super light, right? So it'd be like, I'm just going to shoot the ceiling. So don't put your finger on the trigger unless you want to shoot something.
So how does a gun work here compared to Above the Law being also 1988?
Above the Law is better because actually Steven Seagal he's a gun guy. So
he actually knows what he's
but the bad thing about that is the way he shoots, and he ends up plugging, like he's apparently the most amazing shot in Above the Law because the way he's using his gun. The They Live gun scenes are hilarious because again it's the spray
from the hip,
from the hip.
Yeah.
And, I just shot like 3 guys and
didn't look like a lot of recoil.
But even it's like he shoots a guy. So there's a scene. So he's firing from the hip.
Yeah.
There's a bad alien on the roof. Oh. He hits the alien and then continues to shoot for like a solid 3 or 4 seconds of a scene, and then you can see the alien's like been hit, and he's like falling, and the guy he's like shooting him while he's falling down. He's like all over the place. Like
so good.
It's like you're playing a video game, and you're 12 years old, or your first time being drunk playing a video game, and you're just like running around, like spinning around, shooting the gun in the air. Like
cheat mode.
It was ridiculous.
And this is the problem with early films and video games because the guns never run out of ammo. Like if you have ever shot a gun with like a magazine, like a 30-round magazine.
Especially now, like everything's clipped and shortened. But
literally, it's like if that was real, it would be like, done. Like I've gone through everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And another pet peeve of mine from Thor Ragnarok when you have
Des and Troy.
Scourge.
Yeah, Des and Troy.
And he ends up shooting the M16s.
Yeah.
He keeps shooting and he keeps shooting. And I'm like, okay.
These are Asgardian magic bullets. Like
how many rounds?
Maybe he had a thing with Enchantress, and she
no, because he says he went and picked them up on Earth.
Someone souped them up. It's Marvel. You got to go for the no prize.
Picked them up?
Texas.
Texas.
A place called Texas. Yeah.
And for the record, this is a shout out to all my Texas people. Texas is an amazing state. Yes. I love Texas. All the people that I met in Texas. I love you guys. I can't wait to come back.
Totally go to Texas.
So amazing. So good. Okay, so gun work in They Live.
Bullshit.
Total bullshit.
Handling it like no one would react this way to what's happening right now.
Yeah, she was super calm.
But it alludes to the fact because she's in on it. She's one of those elitists. She knows what's going on. She knows what he's talking about. He's telling the truth, and then she's a triple agent. She's the double agent that then goes back and back and forth.
That's also what's cool about it too, because the subversion of the aliens taking over. They're taking over Earth, but they're taking it over through the elites, right?
Yes.
So when he gets in the car and abducts her, crazy guy doing crazy guy shit, he looks at her with the sunglasses and she's not an alien, it's okay, but she ends up taking on
exactly like the Matrix when
the alien thing.
You get
collaborators again.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody working with the system,
and that's the insidiousness of getting it. That
cipher. Yeah,
even though this is a cheesy B movie, there's layers, and that's part of what makes it cool shit.
Yeah.
Apparently, John Carpenter casted Meg Foster in this film after he had saw her performance in a Canadian film called Ticket to Heaven in 1981. He's like, I kind of want that person. That's where it comes from. Another really cool thing is, I was just looking on this. This is not really a Dane's Dungeon thing, cool shit or bullshit. Maybe Jason probably will love this, but it says here, some trivia. It says on an episode of Monster Vision in 1993, Roddy Piper mentioned that John Carpenter had wanted him to discuss the film's political subtext, which was critical of Reaganomics at the time. while doing promotions for the film. However, due to being in the United States on a green card, Piper felt that it wasn't his place to discuss American politics. He also noted that he had rather liked President Reagan and thus didn't really agree with the film's politics. So he would shy away from talking about the film and the politics while promoting it. So, which is quite interesting.
It's kind of bullshit, though. You're in a movie about conspiracy and capitalism and making money off of it, and he's like one of those fucking sellout guys, even though he's a character.
Doesn't matter. I mean, you can be in film and have different political views.
Totally.
So here's an interesting thing about that. So this is going to go down the rabbit hole. Okay. So we're going to jump over to MCU at the moment.
Wait, I have one more Dane's Dungeon, if that's...
Oh, we're going to come back to it.
Okay.
I was going to say, it would be interesting to see what Jesse the Body Ventura would say about this. You want to talk about political views.
Oh yeah, but everyone has one. So that kind of the reason I was going to talk about the MCU. So if you look at the Avengers, right?
Yeah.
So we watch the Avengers and we love the films and all that stuff. But if you follow any of the actors on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, they each have political views, and some of them are right wing and some of them are left wing, and it's totally different. Like there's a huge mix in it. You're like, wow, Captain America, like Chris Evans is like he's super liberal.
Right.
You know, and it's interesting.
Explains a lot about that dark phase of Captain America there. Civil War Captain America. Fuck.
And we did the episodes on Star Trek as well, and the main guy for Star Trek Continue was talking about how, I don't know if we mentioned this in the episode or not, but he was talking about how when they get it just right, they have equal criticism coming from the left and the right. The right people saying you're being too leftist, and the left people saying
that's perfect.
You're being too right. And he says that's when they know they nailed an episode, is when they get equal criticism from both. And he was saying how they have liberals and conservatives both on the show. So
I think for me, what I want to bring up on Dane's Dungeon is it's a two-parter.
Yeah.
First part is the glasses, just the style, these glasses that everybody's wearing, that iconic kind of, it's almost like old school Ray-Bans kind of, but without the little dots on the sides.
Yeah.
But do you think that's cool shit or bullshit? Because I mean, I'm not a reference to that time period or what the
those are the like I'm looking at the glasses on your head right now. Those are the classic of the 80s. Like everyone had those. The risky business,
and that's cool shit. Like it was just supposed to be like a normal casual thing.
Yeah,
like it wasn't a style, because these are the style. These are iconic. Well, these are like the Ray-Ban.
You also got to remember, like in the movie, it's a low budget movie, and they had tons of those glasses in. Remember, they had the box full of them there, so it had to be a common thing that they could just have a box full of them there to go with, right?
Okay. So for me, it seems like cooler shit because it's like retro, and that's the style still today. And it's not, it's not the, there's so many glasses that have come through that era.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the ones that stands out besides aviators. You know what I mean?
Or gargoyles if you're going to get into Terminator. But
right.
That'll be another episode.
But and then the next thing, cool shit or bullshit, is how they made them. That whole laboratory scene in the church, like fuck.
That was bullshit.
Yeah. So what they do is, if you look, they come in and they have these sunglasses and they scan, and there's like all this liquid in beakers and stuff, and it's like, so they're painting the glasses
and a bunch of lenses, like just sitting there, like
yeah, they've got these harsh chemicals in the church where they're making these glasses that they're just banging off, and then a couple days later, they've got these contact lenses in 1988 that they've managed to put together that have the same technology.
What did they say
they've
in there? It was
up.
kind of like, it's like, oh, we've upgraded. Because
new tech.
Which is funny because we were watching it. Remember, they come up and there's a biker guy, and you're like, wait a minute.
Why is the guard not wearing glasses? Because he's standing on the shotgun.
How can he let him in? He doesn't know they're not aliens because he's not wearing the glasses.
Yeah, you picked up on that immediately.
Which was great, but that's good, is when the movie can, even though it's a cheesy B movie, it still answers that question.
Did they have, I'm going to sound like a ignorant millennial, but did they have contacts at that time? Like, was that okay? That's
contacts have been around forever.
Oh, okay,
but contacts, man, when I got my first contacts, and they were glass. Anyway,
and that was
those things hurt.
And that was a hilarious thing. They put in the contact lenses in the film, and it was like Dirty Hands. It's like, oh, just put them in.
Yeah, Dirty Hands, put them in. Get in fight scenes, no problem.
They put it in like 3 seconds,
and they literally stayed in for the entire rest of the movie as they're running around doing everything.
But they put them in right away. Like if you've ever got contacts, unless you're some sort of prodigy, try putting those things in the first time. It took me freaking weeks.
They're in like little like prepackaged like seal things. You just peel them open and pop them in. Like that was bullshit.
So that's our segment on Dane's Dungeon, the cool shit and bullshit thing. And Jason and I and Alex we keep talking about 1988 as a year for film, especially in action films. And another movie that came out in 1988, which I'm not sure you guys realize, there was a film called Alien Nation. Do you remember that one? Which was another Hollywood science fiction film. It was released the same year, and it featured alien characters assimilated into modern day society on planet Earth. It's very apropos So tons of stuff came out that year. So it's so good.
I think, and a thing I said too is, you can tell the times, like the people were excited about the future in the 80s. They were geared up. It was like, we're ready to jump into the 90s. Yay, yay, yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like everybody's freaking out.
That
Global
was
warming. The world, literally, I've grown up in a world since my teenage years of being aware of what's happening. Everything's going to end.
And
the world is over.
right, and
There's
you know-
nothing to look forward to. You better fix your shit because it's all going to end.
Right.
Everything's going to die. That's my world. You guys
And
grew up
one
in
of
an
those
era of
one of those
looking
turning
forward.
points was like this Reaganomics era here, and I mentioned it in the Steven Seagal one with the CIA and all the American stuff in South and Central America and all that kind of thing back then with the Iran-Contra stuff, all that stuff. Back then was a time of the changing of the consciousness. I mean, there's the earlier Vietnam stuff, but during these 80s here, this was part of the darkening of the...
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because they also
But-
talk about in the film when they talk about how do they think that the aliens get off when they're killing each other and the squabble and the war and everything that the humans are experiencing, that's all like a level of control.
Yeah,
that
keep them
they
in conflict.
create
Yeah.
problems, they create like
Yeah.
it's almost like the Matrix when they said our first version of the Matrix was a paradise, but the human brain couldn't accept it
Right.
and rebelled immediately to that level of control. Like if we gave everybody everything that they wanted, they would fucking lose their shit. They'd be like, this isn't reality because we're hardwired as animals to survive in
Yeah.
shitty circumstances, right? We're not evolved enough for that. So there was almost like a little tie into that as well, which I quite liked.
One of the things we also talked about is we saw in there, remember the shanty town, the kind of the homeless camp?
Yeah.
So John Carpenter.
Tent City.
Yeah, the tent city. The tent city, yes. So John Carpenter
2017.
actually brought in real homeless people for that.
Yeah, which is really cool meta level here, right? Because what he's saying, this whole thing about the rich oppressing the poor and stuff, the fact that he paid the homeless people there in as extras
Yes.
to do the thing,
He
he really believes.
Which was cool
doing
because
there.
Piper actually said this is a really classy thing for him to do. He paid them, and John Carpenter also fed them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So so that was just kind of a little neat kind of trivia side topic to that. So, very cool. So as they kind of go through the movie and we get towards, the end, they make their way to the TV station channel 54 and they work their way in and they have to destroy the satellite on the roof of the building because that's
everything. The highest technology then is satellite.
We should have talked about the in the cool shit or bullshit, the teleporter that they had. And there's that,
Yes.
there's like a teleporter, and there's that big fucking satellite sitting beside it.
That's
And
what I'm
literally, they're
saying.
like warping people in, like they just
Into space.
It's like it looks like a Star Trek pad that you stand on
Yeah.
for teleportation.
Yeah.
then
But it doesn't
the
work
difference
unless
is-
you've got a satellite dish.
Yeah, and they just like go into a little sphere, and then they just like shoot across the universe in this little ball. But there's a big satellite that's
Yeah.
somehow doing something with it.
Right,
Like
and
the
the-
satellite dish is the key,
Yeah, and the little things that are going sleep, 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 sleep.
yeah,
They're little
satellite
satellite
dishes,
dishes
yeah.
that are around to project the message to all the TVs
You've got
and to keep the people
brainwash
thing.
and teleportation, but you're
it's-
using fucking satellite,
satellite.
dishes.
So remember, they're doing a cable TV thing. So in the late '80s, satellite TV was like, oh my god. I remember like when we lived in town, and then we had cable TV, and he moved out to the country, and anyway, too much.
One of the other things we were chatting about just after the kind of teleporter thing, going back to the shantytown stuff, apparently still today where that location is, it still sits abandoned and undeveloped 30 years later.
Wow.
And they haven't done anything with it.
Is it still kind of a shanty town, or is it?
No, there's nothing there. It's
Oh,
just,
wow.
it's
They
basically...
bulldozed it, man. The cops
Yeah,
came in.
yeah, they destroyed it. Didn't you see the movie?
I love it during the film. It's like Alex looks at me and it's like, do you guys do that?
Yeah, like it's like
No.
you guys got your bulldozer. Like it was like this It was
It was a bulldozer. It was a huge
massive
bulldozer.
bulldozer. Like the stupidest dimensions too. Like not
Yeah.
even practical for construction. It's literally like it was designed.
Whatever
for
they could,
wiping out shanty
whatever
towns.
they could grab. Yeah, you don't generally probably get to use the nightsticks on blind preachers. Probably.
Well,
not.
and I also want to note that they were using like the tonfa batons, the
Yeah.
old school with the little bar off the sides. You
Yeah.
could really get some wax. There was a pretty cool like night sticking action that was happening there
There was
too.
a ton of it. There was
Yeah.
a lot of beatdowns.
Yeah.
One of the things that Roddy Piper actually said in the film was that he says he credits John Carpenter and They Live for jump-starting the wrestler turned actor genre.
Yeah.
Because no one had done it before. And Piper was actually like the first. He paved the way. He says, I was the first wrestler ever in history of wrestling to star in a major motion picture, and that became a #1 box office over the weekend.
Was it #1 box
Yep.
office? Wow.
And it gave him the itch and other wrestlers to jump into film.
Did he do other movies?
He might have done a couple, but they never were as big
You
as
can't
They Live.
top that They Live.
So, I mean, it's very cool.
Well, you look at it like, someone as iconic as The Rock. People don't even nowadays. Kids probably don't even know he was a wrestler. Like that's how huge and famous he's become.
Yeah, and it's funny you said The Rock because actually when Piper was talking about this, he says, and not one of them to this day has actually has the quality picture like the one I did for They Live, and not one of them has had a #1 film.
Oh, The Rock.
But when did he say that?
Right,
Too,
so
right?
that was years ago. I mean, obviously The Rock has destroyed. I mean, he's the guy in Hollywood, and he's just even getting bigger.
Although
and bigger.
I think he's kind of jumped the shark personally.
I love him.
That's another podcast.
I love him. I love
We'll
The
get
Rock.
into that.
He's amazing. It's so good. So, So what other kind of things can we think about as we're closing off here for?
I think
John Carpenter's the thing.
We need to talk
They
about
Live.
the ending of it for sure, and how at that time that was a pretty shocking, kind of that Black Mirror way to build you up, develop a story, and then to end it like that and be like. I guess full disclosure, spoiler alerts here. We're going to reveal the end of the movie. So if you've seen
let's go for
it, stop listening now, watch it and come back. But basically what happens is at the end of the movie, they find the satellite dish and he ends up being shot as he's shooting the satellite dish.
No, but even before that.
Oh, the traitor part?
So they're taking over the TV not taking over, but coming through the cable 54 station, going up, trying to get up to the satellite dish.
On the roof,
right?
yeah. It's always on the roof.
It's on the. Where else are you going to put a satellite dish? In the basement? Come on. So they're getting up there, and of course, then they're at the same time as they're trying to get up there, they're looking for the girl, right?
yes, and then she turns out to be.
So
the traitor,
they find her, and then they're going up to the roof with her, and Piper's character goes ahead. He's first, right?
Yeah.
And then the other two are behind. So what happens there?
What I did like about that is for a supporting actor to just be like the second guy to be just capped so quickly.
Yeah,
it was just like boom, and they didn't make a big deal of it. Like boom, just dead, no big deal.
Cold-blooded bitch, just fucking,
and then move
cut
on.
the
Yeah, exactly. And then I do like how he turned around and ended up shooting her, and then. The helicopters had enough time to swing around and shoot him, but not before he shoots the satellite. And then he's lying there with his last dying breath. He's got this big shit-eating grin on his face, and he just flips off the people in the helicopter.
Yeah, and it got a laugh from all of us. And so here's an interesting point on that, right? So Piper said he regretted his performance at the end of the film when he flipped the bird to the camera. And the reason he did that, he goes, it should have been straight and strong instead of weak and slightly bent.
Okay.
Oh, I see. So
should have been like one of those.
I guess that's where it almost would sway it more towards that B movie type thing. But I thought it was funny just because that character himself was that embodiment of it started off very neutral and became quite erratic at the end, with all his one-liners and the way he would kill people and swinging the gun around like a lunatic. Like he almost became crazier.
Yeah, the longer the sunglasses.
Yeah.
The longer the sunglasses are on.
Yeah.
Which, after you finish this, I want to make a point about influences on other,
but anyway,
other things.
I think it was a little groundbreaking in terms of the way that you have a film where it would lead you up and then just drop you, take you to a zone, and then stop and say, "This is where you are. This is the end of it." It's not a Lord of the Rings. It's not it's not one of these films where it leads you through a journey and it comes to a conclusion. You don't get the ending.
That's like you get to the top of the
middle
volcano and Sam gets fucking killed.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's the end. Just the ring. The ring is sitting there. Everybody's dead. The ring is right by the volcano. What are you gonna do?
Yeah,
It's like
kill him.
Yeah.
And funny, the film itself, it cost $4 million to make. That's how much it cost in 1988. Yep.
Whoa.
And there's a kind of a snafu in the film. In the opening scene, when Roddy Piper's walking in, there's a train that goes by, right? He's waiting there.
Yeah.
And so that wasn't a scene where they actually had to hire the train to do that. And they screwed it up and they had to film it again. And apparently the 2 shots that took to hire the train to do it was $12,000.
Wow.
Just to have the train just kind of go and then him walk over the tracks.
Yeah. But that makes a big point too. Like again, with the homeless people out there that they're using for the extras and the cast, that $12,000 for that extra shot.
Wow.
How many meals is that? Like,
But that's the whole thing is like.
no, but I'm just saying it's a microcosm.
Oh yeah,
of the
Hollywood
whole,
spends a lot of money.
and again, it's they're the ones who produce the media, and then it's like you look at even the YouTube channel. So you have even us. You have this free media that's available to anyone, and then as soon as it gets big, ads, commercials, it just becomes this conglomerate of sellout. Like I can think of Epic Mealtime. Where did that go? That exploded and then just like completely became. They started to make their own show and sell out, and then it just disappeared after it became some big conglomerate owned by multiple people and was all terrible. So it's just it's that selling out. It's that once you make it, how do you take an art and give it to the people in its purest form? But then once you become famous on that art, and once it's your job to produce that art, are you just shoveling shit, or are you producing art? And then
well, it just kind of depends on if you keep true to your vision, right? Yeah. And who are we to say if people have kept true to their vision?
But the pressure, because sometimes it's there's kids, there's youth who are experiencing this, and this is their whole livelihood.
Yeah.
You look at Miley Cyrus as one of my prime examples of this. Like, was that a mental breakdown? What was happening there? Because she's one of those people who has swung through the tabloids, through everything, just done crazy things. And I think, and Justin Bieber, same thing, right? Just to make a name, just to make a statement, just to sell a brand? Or was it a true mental health issue? Do these people really need to be...
See, I've got to jump in right now because you mentioned Justin Bieber.
It's a millennial thing, right?
Did you see the thing with Justin Bieber and Tom Cruise?
Yes, Fight Me. Yeah.
So for those
what
you never saw? Oh, you didn't know?
Celebrity stuff. I don't.
Jason is not connected to the net in the same way.
So
Justin Bieber challenged Tom Cruise to an MMA match, and he's like, Dana White, make it happen.
And he's like, if you don't fight me, you're a coward. And he calls him out and all this stuff. And he's like, what is he like? They did him. He's like 37 or 39 years older than him or something. Like,
oh yeah, he's 55.
Yeah, and anyway, and then so there's a funny thing going around now. I guess you can go online and you can like type in your birthday, and you'll be able to see celebrities who are that much older than you
that you
could challenge. So it'd be funny if we all did
okay,
that.
That's good.
Yeah, because you could see like, oh, I call you out. Like, and anyway, he just says like, you're a coward if you don't fight me or this and that. Like, it was.
So here's the thing that Jason actually touches upon, and we talk about. There's a purity of 80s culture that we absolutely love. There was no internet. There's no people calling each other out, and it's tabloid like newspapers and magazines and stuff like that. But there was something very cool about it, and it's a microcosm in itself. It's like 80s films happened. There, people aren't. Oh my God, what's the message? It's like, you know what? It's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a good time. Oh, it was a great action film. And that's the one thing about the Torvus podcast that I wanted to do. It's talking about fun times that happened in the 80s that we enjoy, that are quote unquote timeless.
Yeah.
And it's not... Yes,
we're not selling you anything.
Yeah, we're not selling anything. I'm not making any money. There's political stuff and messages that go on, but it's not
our opinions. It's not something we're trying to force. There's no agenda.
I'm not offended if you don't like it. You can be offended. Nothing happens to you when you're offended.
Yeah.
Totally. Like your own movies.
Yeah, totally. And so I just appreciate the people who are listening and that enjoy 80s stuff and the geek culture. That's kind of what we're doing. And as we further go down the rabbit hole with other things, it's not just going to be movies. It's going to be, we'll talk about games. We'll talk about science fiction. We'll talk about things like that. That's what it is, martial arts. And it's just things that interest us. That's kind of what we do. So, Jason, did you have anything to end off the Torvus podcast with here?
Well, I mean, there's lots of other things. I think it's a very influential movie. We mentioned before about how the obey thing has become a meme now.
With Obama. And I didn't know that reference. I saw that when you paused it on there, and I said, hey, do you guys see the thing between Obama? And you guys are like, fucking kid, this has been a whole line. I had no idea.
And then there's the whole techno. You know who the Techno Viking is?
No.
We will show you.
Okay, well, the Techno Viking, that's one of the early obey memes too.
Yes.
That came out. But even beyond memes, just influencing other shows and stuff. So you mentioned how it was very Black Mirror-like.
Yeah.
Now, again, I grew up with Twilight Zone and Outer Limits. Still, Black Mirror is awesome because it's like the new inheritor of it. But going from the 80s into the 90s, the 80s was a good transition between the 70s and 90s. There's really got elements of both. But you can see how something like this would influence the X-Files. Now, there's an X-Files episode where they have this thing with this telemarketer at a vinyl siding company that's like thinks his boss is an alien that's in there and only he can see it. And then he ends up they have a shootout and it's a kind of a crazy thing. And then Mulder ends up getting infected by this guy's paranoia and he can see the alien. So only certain people can see it. It doesn't have the sunglasses, but it's clearly influenced by They Live. I mentioned Buffy earlier. There's probably a lot more examples of that. But I think that some of these cult movies like this, they really have a big influence on other things. But they still, even after you've seen the things that have had an influence, they don't necessarily improve upon it going back to something like this. I think it's a great movie because it stands up to the test of time. When I watched it again here, I was like, wow, that was even better than I thought. Some things, later you watch and you're just like, I liked it at the time, but not so good now. And the fact that you hadn't seen it before and you're coming at it from a very different
made it pretty fun.
kind of thing.
We watched, just as a prime example of that, we watched Above the Law, right? And there were a couple scenes in there that were like, ooh, you can't get away with that. Like that's a little bit much maybe, but in this movie it was the message kind of stood the test of time. I mean, I think that overall when you're looking back at things, it's hard to judge because they come from a different place, a different time. But this theme is such an overarching theme, and I think what's awesome about it is it's only gotten worse.
Yeah, but this speaks to like
the message.
It's speaking to the time in that Reagan era where it was really speaking to us then. But you can watch it now, and it still speaks to you today.
I honestly, I'm not a big into politics. I don't know. I'm not as well.
But you can
still
get where it's going.
Absolutely,
it's there, and you don't. If you can see a thing and not go, oh, my time was wasted watching that old crappy B movie. I should have done something else. And I think that's really hard to do because there's a lot of things that aren't worth rewatching. I think I've said this before. Things that are worth watching, and then there's things that are worth rewatching again and again.
So John Carpenter's They Live, totally worth rewatching. It was a good time. We had a couple drinks. We laughed. We chewed bubble gum.
Or tried to blow bubbles. Some of us.
So we have a promo picture that I'm going to put on the internet for that. So I'm going to leave off with just some information on the release of this film. So it opened November 4th, 1988, and it debuted at #1 at the North American box office. It grossed $4.8 million during its opening weekend.
Paid for itself in its opening weekend.
The film spent 2 weeks in the top 10. The film had a total domestic gross of over $13 million, which is huge for...
Which you wouldn't even make a movie for today.
Yeah. So Carpenter is on record for attributing the film's initial commercial failure, which is what he considered it, because basically who goes to the movies in vast numbers these days that don't want to be enlightened? And so that's the problem, because it had an enlightening theme, and people are like, I don't want to know about that stuff. And
because they're asleep.
Yeah. And so the film's original release date was advertised in a promotional material on October 21st, 88, but it was pushed back 2 weeks to avoid direct competition with Halloween 4, Return of Mike Myers, which coincidentally was a sequel to Carpenter's original film.
So he's a victim of his own success.
Yes. Halloween was directed by John Carpenter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, great director. More to come on him. So, gentlemen, really appreciate it. Super fun episode. Fun to watch. Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, that was
wonderful.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks for showing me, guys.
So, until next time, this was episode 8, and we watched John Carpenter's They Live. Check it out and sleep.